But I think that this technology in particular has a better chance because the interface does not require you to go to college for years and years and learn to program and math and statistics and everything. Uh, and there are already programs being built if they are not already in existence for AI literacy. And these are the kinds of courses that might be possible in making the world more equitable in respect to AI. They don't require this kind of technical expertise. They don't require many courses before that and access to education. You can start with AI literacy, and most of it is based on natural language and images and things that you already understand. And again, the main component is to understand what the opportunities are, being able to use them, and understand the harms. We still have to bring, obviously, some kind of computer interfaces to people, but that has been happening for decades. I mean, I have collaborators who've taken computers to Tanzania and other places in Africa. And I can't remember where it was, it might have been in India, there was a possibility for people to interact with computers. Computers were behind a glass, but there was a keyboard, and they would just, by curiosity, learn how to interact with them. But this was with a keyboard, for crying out loud, and maybe a pointer or something, much more difficult than something where they could just talk to it. So if you take a computer LLM interface with displays and everything, it's a natural language interface, and anybody can walk to it and ask questions, start learning.
In Youth We Trust sits down with successful entrepreneurs, business leaders, educators, and others from around the world. We spotlight how individuals and organizations are shaping a better world, directly or indirectly, for the coming generations through their focus on sustainability, equity, education, and more to empower young people to create the future they deserve. And now, in Youth We Trust.
Hello, Risto. Finally, we get to meet, and welcome to the podcast in Youth We Trust.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Prashant.
The whole point of this podcast is to invite leaders from across the world who are making an impact in AI education or sustainability for the next generation. And Lumi cares about the next generation. We are building a platform that enables these young people anywhere in the world to build skills for the future, but also uh, do that by solving the biggest problems in the world. So that's what we call a quest. So what I'd like to do, Risto, is to go back to when you were a student in school or university. I'd like to understand if you had a quest you wanted to go on, or you had a problem that you saw around you that you wanted to solve.
Yeah. Well, I've definitely been on a quest for 40 plus years now. And I remember very well when it started. So it was back in 1991. It was my first course in programming, actually, Pascal on Deck 20 in college in Aalto University, back then Helsinki University of Technology. And we had this first assignment where we wrote a little program that somehow answered questions and asked another question from the user. A little bit of interaction there. And I struggled and struggled and struggled to get it to work through all the bugs and everything. And then it worked. A prompt came on the screen. It asked me something. I answered it, and it reacted to my answer. And it just struck me that this was something really amazing. That I of course knew what it was doing because I wrote the code, and it wasn't anything that complicated. But it was like an other entity inside the machine, an intelligent being that was answering my questions, carrying a conversation with me, and potentially maybe getting somewhere with it. And since then, I've been on this quest to build that kind of an AI, an intelligent machine that would work with us and solve problems, be companions, and we could help each other and enable humans to do better. And it was just this realization. I mean, the best we had at the time was science fiction. There were no personal computers, no phones, cell phones. So this was just the visibility of what might be possible. Artificial intelligence that could serve us as a peer. And that's what I've been doing for my whole career, over 40 years now. and I'm still on that quest today, and probably will be as long as I can I can
That's quite
breathe.
rare. You started something and you are still at it, and actually as your profession, as your life. So when you were embarking on that quest, growing up in Finland, which isn't exactly Silicon Valley, what kind of impediments did you face when it came to pursuing your traditional education? Was it helping you or hindering you in what you wanted to do?
Yeah, well, the education was really good, even at the time there in the 80s, early 80s, um, and technical. But opportunities to really push the envelope in research and certainly in entrepreneurship wasn't there at the 80s. It's totally different now. And in the AI world, you can pretty much be anywhere, access the same resources, and be part of the same community. But back then, it meant that if I wanted to be serious about it, I'd have to move to the US, and that's what I did. I got my PhD from UCLA and stayed as a professor at UT Austin, and now working also in the Valley, in the Silicon Valley, using through AI startups.
So you basically you understood where you really could make the biggest impact when it came to your passion and your profession, which in this case is technology. Now let's look at what's happening in education today. Now let's get straight to AI, because that's been your passion, and you've seen the development of this technology over such a long period of time. What do you think is going to be the position of someone who's taking interest in any subject and is pursuing a traditional degree, yet now you have AI? Do you think people are skilled enough to deal with it?
So this is what's really interesting about this current breakthrough that we're experiencing and we're building on. That for decades, AI was very technical and very selected. You needed to have a lot of background education in any disciplines, statistics, mathematics, engineering. But now AI is actually something that's accessible to everybody. I mean, I was in a panel recently and there were 5 people and they were all from different areas. And one was from legal, another one was government, there was somebody from creative arts. And there was only one person who was actually AI person who knew about AI and developed AI. But everybody had a right to be there because this is technology that affects all of those people and they are going to use it and they're going to shape it in the future. And shaping it means that how do we use it right? How do we use it so that it doesn't cause harm? How do we use it so that it remains productive? How do we actually guide it and guide even the research so that we are developing better systems? So this is very different and very unexpected. And we actually, it's a strength too, because there are so many different voices, so many different opportunities that are coming to play here, and they can make a contribution. So even if you are in a different field, even like creative arts, you now have this wonderful new tool that you can figure out how to take advantage of in creativity. And similarly, in say legal profession, AI is very close to doing a good job in legal reasoning and
Yeah.
bringing in all the information that lawyers need to actually process. So this is what it requires. People will have to reshape their thinking. And how do we take advantage of this new opportunity, this new tool, in order to do better in what we're already doing?
I just saw that Satya Nadella from Microsoft has published a report saying 85% of executives or the workforce is now using AI in some way, but a majority of them have no idea how to use it. So there is a focus now that's developing on how to train the workforce of today on AI. But at the same time, I see absolutely nothing being discussed about how to train the workforce of tomorrow. Now it feels like, oh, it's tomorrow's problem. Who cares? But so the difficulty I see is, how do you prepare the next generation for AI when your education systems are so traditional?
So first, it's really interesting that we are in this situation and we have wonderful AI that can do all kinds of things, and we don't actually know how it does it.
Hmm.
This is not what we expected because we were building everything ground up, in the 80s and 90s and 2000s and so on. We always knew what was going on, and it was not performing well enough. Now it's performing really well, and we don't know what's under the hood. But that's not really that unusual. I mean, you drive a car, and you don't have to really know what's going on under the hood. And we have, of course, brain is even better example of that. That we all are intelligent beings, and we talk to each other and do things. We don't really understand what goes in the brain. We don't know how we actually produce intelligence ourselves. Yet we still can cope with that situation. So this is what AI now is. It's a tool that can do a lot, and we have to learn how to use it, even though we don't fully understand it. Now, research-wise, I want to fully understand it, and there are lots of people who want to do that now. It's an example that we have full access to. Unlike the brain, which is much, much more difficult to image and understand and visualize and follow, we actually have full access to everything that's going on there. We have a chance of figuring it out. And by doing that, we might figure out something about the brain as well. So there's a great research opportunity to understand intelligence and complexity. But that's a research problem. And most people are not going to be concerned about that. Most people will use it like a car or some other tool that they know how to use, but not necessarily understand all the details. And that's what the education system has to be prepared for. Train people on how to use this tool, AI, right now or in the future and in a few years, not assuming that they understand all the nuts and bolts of it, but they should understand the opportunities and limitations. And then have plenty of examples, of course, how it can be applied the right way and what mistakes might come up. And this is also a really interesting situation in that for the first time that I can remember anyway, the community who's building AI is very concerned about the potential harms, about the downsides, about the dangers. And this is, although we're still struggling on how to actually cope with it, how to make AI safe, people are paying attention to it. So one example, counter example, how things went differently is internet. Internet started also kind of the same way. It was a big surprise when everybody was a techie and everybody was talking to each other, and people thought that it was a very selected community and would always be. And all of a sudden, then AOL come around, and your friends are there, your mom is there, and it's like, go away, this is my place. This is tech. And all of a sudden, everybody is using the internet. Now, if internet was being built today, it might be built in a different foundation. Security, safety would be the first principle, one of the very founding principles, that people know how to use it responsibly and how to use it to their advantage, instead of being afraid of it, being reluctant to use it, and then use it in some kind of a half-informed way that causes problems.
Yeah, that's right. And do you think that the response of the education systems has been to embrace it, but at the same time, the young generation is happily going on, engaging with it completely and
Yeah.
freely in their own time? So it's creating this problem that I saw personally more than a decade ago with social media. No one really understood it, whilst the young people used it, and then came the mental health tsunami.
Academia is a very old institution and very set in its ways, and it's difficult to acquire new technology. People do that, though. I mean, there are always innovators in education who are very quick to jump on any new technology to make it work for them. But here, I don't think we have any choice. I mean, this technology will happen. Students will start using it, and we have to adapt to it. And I've seen a lot of discussion of that, how to do that. I mean, if we don't know how to do it right, but it is a tool that can help. For instance, if you're doing coding, if you're learning coding, now, of course, you can turn in all your assignments, done by some kind of code generation program, ChatGPT or something. And that's not really the good way of doing it. But you could also use this as a tool. You can use it as a private tutor in order for you to learn whatever you're doing better. So there's the other side. If you learn to use it that way, it can actually enhance education a lot. Same thing with writing. You can write something, GPT can critique it, give you alternatives, and in that sense have an interactive, system that helps you do better in your creative pursuits. Now, but there's a lot of activity in education. Professors are trying to figure out, instructors trying to figure out how to use it. I mean, it's so easy to ban it, but it's not going to work. So we have to do something very different from that. And then maybe there's also going to be some new balance of how you actually do work offline and how you do work when you are in the classroom and actually interacting with people. So it may upend in the long term what we're doing. And there's a quote. I don't remember who actually said it. It's a colleague of mine. Maybe it's in the literature that academia changes one grave at a time. And that means that professors will not change. They do what they have always done. And it'll be a lot of change. It may actually have to require a whole new generation of people to really do it right. But I wouldn't really, blame professors too much. If there's something really interesting going on, they'll try to do it. And there will be innovation by everybody. It's scary, of course. But again, the will is there, to make it from the get-go. I believe most people realize that this is something that is going to change. It's our job to make it right, to change it the right way. It's our opportunity to have. And it's not going to happen overnight. There's going to be mistakes. But education is going to be changed for the better because we have such much better tool now.
Now, let me switch to a different question. What is the role of companies in preparing this next generation for this change? They've been lazy, if I have to be provocative, because they get these university students with degrees and they can actually then choose people on that basis. But now what?
Well, the whole change was and is driven by industry. But at the same time, there's a community that's forming that is actually one community. Industry researchers, academic researchers, we go to the same conferences. We talk with each other all the time. People go back and forth. Internships, people do their dissertations in industry, they get academic credit. This is really wonderful. And right now, it's a wonderful place to be because you can move back and forth and you can talk to each other. Now, there are, of course, side effects and issues that we have to deal with. I mean, it's a little difficult for people to stay at school when there's so much excitement in industry. But I think also that's gotten a little better because of this opportunity that you can do your dissertation while working in industry, in some cases anyway. And I hope that becomes more common because it is one way to advance science, and industry and academia both get the benefit. But again, it's a structural change, and we have still work to do to figure that out. There's
Right.
still a danger that industry becomes closed, that the competition or economic factors or political factors, for that matter, could come in and silo this, that everybody develops their own system and don't talk to anybody. That would be really a shame.
This episode is brought to you by Lumi.network. We're on a mission to help the next generation prepare to take on the world. Our AI-augmented platform runs quests that help 10 to 25-year-olds shape their future by developing AI, entrepreneurship, and design thinking skills to solve the most pressing business and social issues. If you or your organization wants to impact the next generation positively, we'd love to talk to you. To learn more, visit Lumi.network.
Well, what about the students at school? They're also using AI. Do you think that skills like these need to be built much earlier now?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to start as soon as you start using social media and other tools like that. I mean, this is of course a big problem. We don't quite understand all the effects that social media and access to technology has on young kids. So it needs to be guarded, and a lot more work has to be done on mental health and other aspects of technology. But of course, like everything, you can most likely do it right. You can do it in measured quantities with the context set right. And like we now have a digital generation that grew up with social media, all integration of this different technologies, telephones with images, video, internet, AI is part of that. and the generation now in schools, for them, AI has always been there. In a couple of years, they've lived, this is what the world is like. They always talk to AI. Their concept of interaction with machines will be different. We have a chance to also control it and make it right, that they understand how to interact with it. That AI is only a machine, and it has its own limitations, but it's also a tool for them to grow and to be creative and to be productive. Now, so like I said, this is something we have to figure out. This is even harder than doing it at the level of PhDs and college education, because we also have this entire growth, and we have already seen some harms, partly from the COVID times. COVID is a good kind of precursor of what might happen, and people will so immerse in technology that the human interactions become less, and there's dangers to it. So in some sense, fortunately, we actually had a preview, so we have an idea that this is important to look at, and it has to be looked at the same time as we are training and educating people, young people, with AI.
Yeah. So let's talk about the work that you're doing right now. Um, how's that addressing some of these topics? Industry academia collaboration, empowering people. What kind of work are you doing at the AI lab in Cognizant?
Oh, okay.
And then, of course, how does it
Then let's
relate
continue.
to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So our lab at Cognizant, even though it's an industry lab, it's a research and development lab. So we focus on fundamental problems. And we are focusing in particular on decision AI, which means using AI to help people make better decisions. In business, in government, in science, education, we've developed software, in principle, technology, to do that, to use AI to predict what will happen and then make suggestions of what you should do about it. And this is kind of a combination of a lot of different areas of AI. There's a standard machine learning part based on data, based on labels that exist in the world. And then there's this innovative aspect, the creative AI, evolutionary optimization, search, that allows you to discover things you don't already know, which is really interesting. It's a creativity beyond what LLMs and image generation systems can do today, and also expanded to decision making, where we are affecting society. But also then applications. Sometimes they come from business, from customers who need to do something, and we've realized that technology doesn't exist. We have to build it. One of them was uncertainty. How can you trust the recommendations or predictions of AI? It's difficult to make such quantitative assessments, but we had to develop the technology to do it. And once you have it, the decision maker actually can see what the alternatives are and how likely they are to bear out or play out. So that's an example that comes from industry, but also just AI for good applications. There's, like I said, so much will now to do something good with AI. So, for instance, climate change or equality or forest fires or whether protein folding, and that could have impact on medicine. There are fascinating topics where we can now take AI and really help help the world, help society, help science, medicine, help education. So we're doing that as well. We, of course, have to pick up a few. We've started with the COVID-19. One of our biggest investments was to build a system to predict and especially prescribe how governments and municipalities should deal with COVID. What kind of restrictions? Should they close the schools? Should they have them open alternate days? Should they close transportation? What's the best way to cope when you don't have pharmaceuticals just yet, with something like COVID? And then we adapted that to climate change. What's an optimal way of allocate land use? If you can make a certain amount of change, what should you do? And we are looking at treatments for aphasia, for instance. When a person suffers a stroke, for instance, there's a long period of exercises, treatment, rehabilitation. How do you do that optimally so that you recover with as much as little work as possible and as quickly as possible? So there are many such opportunities, and what's also interesting is that you got to team up with other people who are domain experts. Can't do it in isolation if you want to have an impact. And now I think with AI being there everywhere, people in other fields are understanding that there's an opportunity. So they are more willing to actually work with you. It used to be a lot harder 20 years ago to get anybody to listen or see the opportunity. But now I think people are thinking about these opportunities already. So if we have the dream team is to have somebody who is an expert in, say, stroke rehabilitation and understands, maybe envisions a role for AI, and then we bring in the technology. And together we can actually make something that
And these
is not
are,
just working, but also deployed. Go ahead.
yeah, and these are real solutions that you're working on right now within AI for Good, with the whole thing around stroke, land use for climate, etc.
Sure. Well, they are real in many ways, but some of them are things where we really build that we believe that we can make something that can be deployed. For instance, the stroke treatments. There's a pathway. We have a collaborator, Constant Therapy, who's actually building or who has an application that's already being used. So, now, land use change, that's much harder. I mean, you have to talk to governments. You have to, and COVID was the same thing. We were able to talk to some governments. We had an audience in Iceland, as a matter of fact, and we advised them on how schools should be opened in 2021. And other collaborators in our X Prize competition we did for COVID, also in Valencia, had government collaborators, but it was by far not global yet. And that was the point. There was to demonstrate that it's possible, and then have a lot of publicity so that next time such opportunities come around, people are aware of it. And now it's much easier. People are aware of it. But that's why I said you got to have collaborators. Some of our projects do, and there's a clear path to actual deployment, and others are still more demonstration projects of what's possible.
Right. I've got two more questions before I actually just step into the future a little bit with you. So one is that y- you talked about sustainability in AI, right? I see this as a very tricky one because, on the one hand, training one LLM itself can actually consume such a huge amount of energy. And on the other hand, AI is accelerating the work on sustainability. How do you see, uh, you know, companies like you managing the carbon footprint of AI?
Big challenge, obviously. There are definitely two forces at play, and they are at odds. Um, it's on the other hand, you have to take advantage of the compute. This is where the breakthrough came from. It would not have happened without a huge amount of compute, and it has large footprints, no question about it, carbon footprint. Um, on the other hand, people are aware of this. And for instance, some of the conferences, I think ICLEAR at least, maybe others, NeurIPS, they require you to calculate the carbon footprint of your experiment that you're reporting in the paper. So far, I don't think it actually is part of the review process, but at least you're aware of what you're doing. And the first step might be that we no longer require the same kind of statistical significance testing that we used to do even 10 years ago, where you repeat your experiment 50 times or 100 times to show that you can estimate the future performance, because that's really just adding a lot of carbon footprint to your experiments and to your paper. And then we can hopefully use the energy where it really matters, like building a better model. And also research topics. There is actually a lot of technology in how to make these models smaller and more energy efficient, and paying attention to that research, and that's what we
That's
learned
true,
here.
yeah. So now that's one thing, right? So I understand. I think you've given me a concrete example, which is helpful. Now, on the other hand, you're sitting in Silicon Valley, right? And you're talking about collaboration between academia and industry. You're talking about how you're solving different problems, but at the same time, access to AI is so marginal in this world. So how are you thinking about equity here?
Well, that is a big problem in general. I mean, equality is, by all metrics, it's huge, and inequality is, and but I think that this technology in particular has a better chance because the interface does not require you to go to college for years and years and learn to program and math and statistics and everything. And there are already programs being built if they are not already in existence for AI literacy. And these are the kinds of courses that might be possible in making the world more equitable in respect to AI. They don't require this kind of technical expertise. They don't require many courses before that and access to education. You can start with AI literacy, and most of it is based on natural language and images and things that you already understand. And again, the main component is to understand what the opportunities are, being able to use them, and understand the harms. We still have to bring, obviously, some kind of computer interfaces to people, but that has been happening for decades. I mean, I have collaborators who've taken computers to Tanzania and other places in Africa. And I can't remember where it was. It might have been in India. There was a possibility for people to interact with computers. Computers were behind a glass, but there was a keyboard, and they would just, by curiosity, learn how to interact with them. But this was with a keyboard, for crying out loud, and maybe a pointer or something. Much more difficult than something where they could just talk to it. So if you take a computer LLM interface with displays and everything, it's a natural language interface. And anybody can walk to it and ask questions, start learning. And then we make also a learning experience. It's not just first is to pique their curiosity and give them the opportunity to do it. Some while they are working, going to work, they stop by and spend 5 minutes. Next time, maybe 10 minutes, something like that. And then maybe entice them to actually learn about it through these tutorials that are done in natural language that are AI literacy based. I think there is an opportunity here that didn't exist before in digital, that created the digital divide, because the interface is so much easier.
Yes.
And I think we should not waste it. I think there's a lot of will and there's opportunity to actually do good in this respect as well. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take some investment, but it's better. There's a better opportunity than there was before.
I agree with you on that. Yeah. So the last question really is, where do you see us as humanity by 2040? What's your wildest prediction of where we might be?
Well, yes, that's always going to be wrong. anything that you predict like that, we had no idea. I also, before I went to college, I watched humans land on the moon, and I was sure that was going to be me in a couple of years. Building a colony on the moon or Mars. It was so obvious. I mean, what had happened in just 10 years, how far we gotten in space flight, and it turned out to be not at all like that. But that's still my vision, that now with better technology and new interest, we are going to go to the moon and Mars and other places, build colonies, expand as a species in that way. We are outgrowing the Earth, obviously, and we are not taking very good care of it. But being able to expand that way could solve a big part of the problem. And I do see that AI has a lot to do with it. I mean, it allows us to do better designs, solve problems more reliably, solve them cheaper, and in that sense, and also gives us more time if we can use AI to fix climate change, for instance, and equality, and it might even serve a role of unifying people. Like I said, anybody can access internet now if you give them an interface so they can talk to each other. We already can. Just imagine this. We can talk across just about any major language right now with a universal translator. So we could actually somehow take advantage of that and learn to talk to each other across different cultures. And there are always people, especially young people, who are curious about it. And this could also help us understand each other better and maybe get around at least language barriers and hopefully cultural barriers as well. That would then enable us to do something like go to Mars, which requires a lot more than than a couple of startups perhaps, then it requires a lot of people working together. So that would be my kind of a hopeful vision of the future, that we take advantage of these technologies to take advantage of then the creativity in mankind, humans around the world, so we can address really big questions, really big issues, and expand as a species.
Well, great. Look, I think you've been a thorough optimist all through. I think it's great to see someone in this space for so long and yet be optimistic. Probably that's why you're optimistic. I've seen the same thing with some people in sustainability, because they're saying, look, because I can see so much happening, I'm optimistic. I'm not pessimistic. But for now, thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your perspectives, sharing your journey, and for tolerating my questions.
It's been a pleasure. Really fun talking with you, Prashant.
Thanks for listening. If you found this conversation valuable, please leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you have a story or someone you know does, please recommend them to us by email at hello@lumi.network. We'll see you next time on In Youth We Trust.